Supply management is a uniquely Canadian agriculture system that controls the production and prices of dairy, poultry, and eggs. It matches domestic supply with demand and stabilizes farm prices for certain commodities. You'll ask, why was the supply management implemented in the first place? What was the reason behind it? Well, before supply management, there was chaos in the market. In 1960s and early 1970s, Canadian farmers, especially dairy, egg and poultry producers, were stuck in a cycle of overproduction, price crashes, unpredictable incomes, and waste and product dumping. Milk, for example, was being dumped in ditches or fields because there was no system to match supply with the actual demand. Meanwhile, competition between provinces made things worse. For example, egg producers in Manitoba were shipping eggs into Quebec and undercutting the prices. Provinces began putting up trade barriers against each other. It got so bad that it led to what people call the chicken and egg war. That's the reason why government steps in. And in response, the federal and provincial governments decided to coordinate the production, stabilize farmer incomes, and the price wars between provinces, avoid overproduction and waste. In 1972, Canada passed Farm Products Agencies Act, which laid the legal foundation for national marketing agencies, starting with the Canadian Dairy Commission. By 1972, Canada had a national milk supply management plan in place. Archit, would you like to describe how does that even work?
Yeah, I think people need to first be aware of what dairy and poultry supply management in Canada really is. To oversimplify the explanation, if you look at some countries like the US or Mexico or Australia for that matter, Australia is a fun one to understand, but let me get off to US and Mexico first. When they are working with producing eggs, when they are working with farmers, the farmers in US do not have a supply management in place. What supply management is? Government interference. What government interference is? Now, this is not something where the government is trying to step in into a private industry and telling everybody this is how you should do. Well, somewhat similarly, but not a lot. In US, if you have a farm, if you are a farmer, if you have a lot of cattle and if you are producing eggs, you don't have anything stopping you and telling you, okay, this is how much you can produce, or this is how many cows you can have on your farm, or if this is how much cattle you can have on your farm, or this is how much milk you can milk in a certain month, day, week, or a year. Versus in Canada, what you have is a system called Dairy and Poultry Supply Management in Canada. Like Sunny said, it was formed in 1970. Before 1970, post World War II, a lot of farmers, they were having an issue with controlling market fluctuations on dairy and egg and poultry prices. What that means is you had overproduction. You have milk coming in the country from the US. You have dairy products coming into Canada from other countries. While the farmers in Canada, they were having a little bit of issue and they were poaching the Liberal government. Back then it was a Pierre Trudeau Liberal government. And they came out with a solution. The solution that they came out is a supply management. They formed an agency called the Canadian Dairy Commission. What this means is you have a control over how and when and in what quantity can you really produce milk, eggs, and how many cattle and how many dairy farmers you have in Canada. You can basically control the whole industry, the whole farming industry. This is how dairy management really works. You, like Sunny said, there are three pillars to this supply management system in Canada. The three pillars are price control, import control, and how you manage the production of the dairy farming industry in Canada. They do not like imports. of dairy products, whether be it milk, whether be it eggs, whether be it any other dairy product from other countries. Canada also does not want to export a lot of dairy products into other countries. What this system does is try to create a blanket over the farming industry and telling them, okay, you will only focus on the domestic, national, within Canada only. You will focus only on the domestic consumption and production. If right now we have 40 million population in Canada, then you will solely focus on the 40 million people only. Do not focus on exporting to other countries. Do not focus on creating some trade deals with other countries. Okay, we will give you more eggs and dairy, and in return this is what we will take. Da, da, da. What that means is, if the Canadians will not consume more than a certain amount of milk, eggs or dairy products in a year, the supply management will not let the farmers produce more than that. In US, what happens if you own a farm? You have 500, 600, 1,000, 2,000, 15, and there are some farms which have more than 20,000 cows, just the cows. Imagine other cattle that they have in their herd. So much cattle that they have in their farms. Imagine what happens when you overproduce milk than what the country needs. What happens with all that milk, eggs, other dairy products that are overproduced? You might think the retailers might be able to sell them for cheap. Well, that is one part. What happens to the other? Because retailers cannot take everything. All that overproduced gets spilled over. Well, what if all that overproduced you could have exported to other country? This is where supply management really comes into a controversial light. Now, I can explain you a lot more, but let's keep this podcast going. What do you think about all this, Sunny, so far?
Yeah, I agree. There's key import controls that supply management has already put in place. High tariffs are applied to imports beyond a small quota to prevent foreign oversupply from entering Canadian market. Under World Trade Organization rules, Canada maintains very high over quota tariffs. For example, about 241% on milk, 245.5% on cheese, 295.5% on cream, and 298.5% on butter. These import barriers uphold the domestic price structure by keeping out the cheap imports. For example, say US farmers, like you discussed, they have 2,000, 3,000 cows. Obviously their efficiency would be much higher. Their cost to produce per milk per cow would come less as well to the consumer cost. If that sort of supply comes and dumps over to Canada, the Canadian farmers will be impacted very bad. And that is what this control imports does for the Canadian farmers. This pillar has made supply management a flashpoint in trade talks, as discussed later. Well, we'll discuss about, for example, what are the key or principles regarding how, say, milk under supply management has worked. The government has set some how much milk Canadians will need next year. That demand is turned into national quotas divided by province and then by farmers. Each farmer is guaranteed a stable price for milk. Imports of foreign milk are kept to a strict minimum. What's the result of all of this? Farmers get predictable, stable income. Consumers pay more at the grocery store, but prices are stable. Canada has very few farm bankruptcies in these sectors. Think about if there is ever an outbreak or if there is ever a recession for whatever reason and consumers are not able to buy the amount produced, what will happen to that farmers if they're in an open market, if the prices are adjusted to a global market? Well, scenario could be seen in US, New Zealand, these countries, where if something happens bad, then what ends up happening is the farmers, the small farmers, are the real ones that are hurt very bad because they do not have a year over year stable income to work with. And if something goes bad a year, their farmers, they go under the bank. And either A, they file bankruptcies, or B, they go and join with the big firms. Archit, what do you think about it?
Yeah, you just said, Sunny, Canadian farmers will suffer with more imports if US were to export more to the US. You just said that the US farms have 2-3 thousand cows in their herd, and what if they are able to produce milk more cheaply and they have ability to export more to Canada? The Canadian farmers can suffer. Well, this is the same thing that you can compare with what exactly is going on with the steel and aluminum sector in Canada. Why isn't Canada in has more trade deal, has more trade pacts with other countries? Why are we not exporting the milk or to other countries? Why is US the one and the biggest customer of Canada? If China is just one country, seven seas away, and they are able to export pretty much anything and everything to all the world, Canada can do the same thing. There is nothing that's stopping Canada right now. Canada puts obstacles all by itself in front of it. If Canadian farmers today are in this position, that is only because they themselves voted on this supply management system. In comparison, if we see, Sunny, Canadian farms, Ontario and Quebec, these are two main provinces which are producing the bulk of the milk and some of the dairy products. The average farm, how many cows do they really have? The average farm, now that there's going to be some big farms, some small farms, but the average farms do not have more than 90, 95, 100, 105 cows. That's it. What is the average farm in US in states like California, Wisconsin, Idaho? Average farm size is exceeding more than 1,500, 2,000 cows, some of them having more than 20,000 cows. Of course, they are going to be able to produce milk more cheaply. Of course, they are going to be able to produce butter, cheese, butterfat more cheaply. Of course, they are going to have lower prices in the retail stores. Of course, even after this retail store markup, the consumers in US are going to be able to afford, will have much more affordability than what Canadians have. Imagine if you are a consumer today, you are going to a retail store, you are going to a Sobeys, you're going to a Farm Boy, you're going to a Freshco, you're going to Food Basics, you are going to Safeway in Alberta, you are going to any other grocery store. Imagine how much really are you paying for milk, and how much could you have saved if you were to buy at the same prices if you had bought the cheaply imported product from the US without the 300% import tariffs. Sunny, you said Canadian farmers, they have a few bankruptcies because of this system. I will actually tell you, Canadian farmers have the same amount of bankruptcies compared to what US farmers have. People might say that Canadian farmers were well protected during the COVID era, during 2020, 2021. Did you know that Canadian farmers actually spilled almost the same, if not more, milk and eggs because of overproduction? Did you know that due to consolidation and bankruptcies, from the beginning of 1970, when this system was formed, we had 145,000 farms in Canada. That is correct, Sunny. 145,000 farms in Canada. How much are we left with today? Less than 10,000. Have you seen the difference? 145,000 versus 10,000 today. 10,000 farms. What about in US? They have free market. I agree they have market fluctuations, but overproduction also leads to less prices for consumers.